question is asked to every other delegation that's asked here, then yeah, fair is fair. But to portray what we say as not factual because you have to ask for the information is disingenuous to every other delegation that comes in here that has a position that may be different or combative. I didn't hear that question asked of the Building Trades Council as an example. That's all I'm saying. To be fair to everybody.
Thank you very much. And I was not intending to in any way question that what you're telling isn't there, but the more detail we have, the more we can actually then assess all the impacts of what may happen, so we don't make.
I'm more than happy to.
Legislators made the mistakes in the various years with legislation. If there were mistakes made, the more we have to avoid making potential mistakes helps us craft the absolute best.
Sure, and I agree. And in the spirit of cooperation, I'm more than happy to provide that information. And as long as that caveat, that issue is provided, is told to everyone, that's fine.
And I've tried to, wherever there's been something I think that needs to be clarified or we need to understand why. Mm-hmm. Like, it's extremely helpful to have these labor relations cases to read.
Yes, I agree. Totally agreed.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. It was also brought to my attention possibly the Saunders case is on hold right now pending the outcome of this legislation. So that might be what we're up against there. I recognize Ms. Juner.
Try to be quick because I know our time is running out. Construction isn't my area of expertise, but when I'm listening to the presentations from all sides and all interested parties, I have distilled it into one issue, and that is that where this legislation will allow a certain representative to come to this province and represent workers, that's either CLAC or CEP or both. It does not address anything to do with workers because workers are now free to come and work here if they choose. And my experience in the past has been with craft unions. As past president of SUN, the nurses union, we of course in the labor in the health sector we're dealt with Dorsey, the Dorsey report back in several years ago. When there was instability in the health sector, Dorsey was brought in to decide which unions would represent which workers and where. And so when I hear that the conversation about choice, I find it a bit of a red herring since I lived through the Dorsey. I was president at the time. I lived through all of that. And the purpose of Dorsey was to bring stability into the health sector and has done so. So when I hear now that we're looking at taking away the ability of an employer to represent, like for SUN to be represented in every workplace in the province and SAHO to be the bargaining agent, it raises in my mind a question of are they next? Are we looking at taking on a different, because we're talking choice and we're making this a big issue about democracy, that is clearly, the SMA deals with doctors and has one representative agent. SAHO deals with the nurses and all other health sector, teachers work. So there's whole different sectors of the province that this does not apply to, your arguments don't apply to because they've lived with this for a long time. So my question is, how come you think that this is different in your case?
Well, because the government's made it different. The government's decided, much the same as, I'm not an expert on Dorsey, but Dorsey's trying to do the same kind of thing. They're saying, you're going to have SUN do this, and this is going to be the organization. You're going to have this how you're going to be organized to negotiate both the employer side, employee side. The same psychology. The government puts a framework together that says this is who's going to represent you. So you have SUN, and you also have, I think, CUPE as well as part of it. So there was comments yesterday that this be like the nurses, just have what's wrong, worse for the nurses, why not for construction? Well, you have two at least. I know the SUN is a major one. But again, on the Dorsey report and its translation to legislation in the reformation of labor relations with nurses is very much the government saying this is the framework we're going to do it on. And we philosophically say that is incorrect. The government does not need to make the choice of who represents employees. Let employees make that choice. This is a fundamental principle of the right of the employee to make the decision. If they choose the current arrangements, we fully support that. If they choose another one, that's fine. It isn't. I don't think it's one issue. It could be, and I'm not an expert in labor legislation by any means. But for me, it's not just about CLAC or CEP. It's about building capacity. One element one tool in the toolbox to build that up. It's also about a conflict of whether you think that you should be craft specific or wall-to-wall. And I'd urge you to consider, to look closely at the evidence of Alberta and British Columbia and Ontario, to look at how does that work and what does it do for the workers. What does that mean for them? Are they being somehow disenfranchised, or are they somehow seeing their rights or their wages roll back somehow? That conversation needs to take place. But to presuppose because it's different, it's bad, I think hurts our province, because we are a land of opportunities here.
Well, I think we'll have to agree to disagree. Your analogy about wall-to-wall, if I look at a hospital, we've got doctors represented by someone, the support staff represented by someone, the technical staff represented by someone, the nurses represented by someone. There is no wall-to-wall in that industry. So I fail to see the argument to have it in this industry, which does have specific crafts attached to the industry, as I understand it, and I must say, this
well, you
isn't
just
my...
said you had CUPE also represents also representative as well, so they're there as well. They're another union.
I said CUPE represents, another union represents support services, which is CUPE in some places, SEIU and others, SGU and others, and HSA, Health Sciences, represents technical workers for the most part. My point was that to say wall-to-wall represents workers' interests best is...
No, I didn't say they were best. I said it was an opportunity to be explored. No, that isn't, because it's not being forced on.
I think probably we should get over this now, because now we are getting into arguing, so I'll end my questions, and thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Thank you very much to the Saskatchewan Business Council for their presentation. We've run a little bit over time, but some good questions.